Hey there, listeners. I had a wonderful interview with a lady called Chrissy Myers. She's the author of a book called Reluctantly Resilient, but she's also the CEO of two organizations, AUI and Clarity HR. The discussion was really quite rich in different areas. We talked about leading by example, but we also talked about how do you navigate your unknowns. Really interesting, right? Because there's a lot of ambiguity out there and people aren't sure about certain things, but how do you navigate it? And the other one was your willingness to be coachable and open to change. Great interview. So sit back and enjoy.
Welcome to Leadership is Changing. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change. This is taking your leadership to another level by finding the balance between executive excellence and personal well-being through stories that inspire real change. It's time to adapt in our fast-moving world when leadership is changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutsas.
Hey there, listeners. Welcome to another wonderful episode of the Leadership is Changing podcast. Great to have you here with us. I have a great guest with me today. Her name is Chrissy Myers. Chrissy, a massive welcome to you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Excellent. Now, whereabouts in the world are you today?
So I am coming to you from the Midwest in the United States in Akron, Ohio.
Oh, nice. Wow. Whereabouts is that in the US?
So Ohio is probably a third of the way inland. It's closer to the East Coast than the West Coast. We're near the Great Lakes, so we border Lake Erie.
Okay, great. Great Lakes. Yeah, now I know where you are. Excellent. And your background, I've given the listeners a little bit of a understanding about your background. So you're the author of a book called Reluctantly Resilient, and you're also the CEO of AUI and Clarity HR. Tell us more about your background, what you've done, what you do today. The listeners would love to hear that.
Yes, so I grew up in a third generation family business, AUI or Associated Underwriters Insurance. So that's why we shortened it to AUI. We do employee benefits for small businesses. And then once I purchased that business in 2019, I also launched a startup called Clarity HR, which does small business fractional HR for organizations that do not need a full-time human resources person. In addition, I am co-captain of Team Awesome Sauce. So when you have 4 people with 3 different last names, a mom who builds businesses and a dad who played team sports, you get a team name, team logo, team purpose statement. Our mission is we radiate awesome to the world. Our motto is put more awesome in the sauce. And so that is the name of our entrepreneurial family.
Oh, very cool. That's excellent. Now, the Clarity HR, that is when you say fractional HR, for our listeners' sake, I think that's what you mean by that is where you, as you said, an organization can't afford a full-time HR person or experienced and so forth, but they could go out and buy it, but they can go out and also have someone come in and do a couple hours a week or 1 day a week. How does that work?
Exactly. So we give you the flexibility to have us as much or as little as you need us in your organization, whether it's an hour per month or 20 hours a week. So it's really flexible for a small business owner. And what we try to do is either we coach a client in how to answer questions, empower them to make decisions around their people, or if they go, I don't want to have those conversations myself, or I don't want to do all the work, will you do it for us? The answer, of course, is yes.
And how come if you were doing insurance, what made you think about wanting to do HR?
So it was an interesting story. So one of our clients that we've had for over a decade had continued to say, hey, you do benefits really well, which is a space oftentimes considered in human resources. So would you think about doing HR? And I said no for years, partly because I didn't own the business. So that was number one. I didn't want to make the business even more profitable and have to pay even more for it. But the other part was HR scared me. I didn't want to hire someone who knew how to hire and how to fire them. And then what happens if we're in this toxic relationship and I don't know how to fire them as a person? So I was really afraid of that space. So I got a call while I was on vacation right after I had bought AUI. And they said, look, if you're willing to try it, if it doesn't work out, we'll pretend like we never had this conversation. You can name it a different name. You can do a different thing. And I was like, fine. So I guess the good thing is I'll start businesses when I'm on vacation. But the other part was it's been extremely successful. Clarity turns 5 this year, and we've continued to grow and expand. And what I love is our purpose statement for AUI and Clarity, because we have one unifying purpose statement for our culture is we provide peace of mind by simplifying the complicated. So we're taking something that can sometimes be overwhelming to a small business owner, how to deal with their human capital, and we're making it simple for them. So I love the weight that I can see lifted off of business owners' shoulders as we continue to help.
Yeah, that's excellent. Yeah, and you're right. It is a lot of pressure on them and they don't know where to go, what to do. And nowadays they're finding, and we'll get into these questions later on, but they're tending to find that they're having to be a little bit more PC, and they're a little bit afraid to
Mhm.
make a decision or do things, and thinking about the kind of not just workload, but also problems they may have later on with people. And you thought about this idea on a holiday, or you started it
On a
off?
holiday.
Yeah.
Started it on a holiday. Thought about it on said yes while we were on a holiday, started it on a holiday, came back and continued to grow. And I was able to find someone to start the company as our first employee, our first HR person. Not only was she had decades of HR experience, she was also an attorney. So on top of hiring something that I thought was going to intimidate me, I hired a lawyer on top of all of it. So I guess it was go big or go home.
Yes. Yeah, definitely. And was that the person sitting around the pool as well that you happened to meet and, and say, let's start a business?
Oh, I wish that would make the story even better.
It would indeed. And tell me your background as well, an author of a book, Reluctantly
Mhm.
Resilient. Tell us a little bit more about that.
So reluctantly resilient is it's a CEO's journey in thriving and figuring out all of the different things that we do in work, in life. And sometimes we're resilient not because we always want to be, we're resilient because we have to be. And so I take a transition that I was in business, and I suffered a business hurricane and a personal hurricane at the same time. In that in 2013, I lost my first husband to suicide. And then 30 days later, we had a major shift in our business with the Affordable Care Act. So, learning how to navigate some of those things, becoming more mindful, becoming more present, working on transitioning a family business. So, these are some of the things that I talk about in Reluctantly Resilient, how to continue to build yourself and build your leadership as you continue to grow as a person and continue to build your resilience as you go through life, because it's not what happens to you, it's how you respond in the aftermath.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, isn't it? It comes down to how we react to things and then what we do with that, which is easy to talk about now. I'm pretty sure in the midst of it, when it was actually happening, it wasn't easy.
Oh, no, kicking and screaming through life is pretty much, I would say, how I described it.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people do face every single day, is that there's so much going on for them that they are kicking and screaming. But I think the thing is, it's how we can calm things down a bit. Or maybe even put it another way, it's about, as you're saying, being resilient. It's actually you being in control. It's actually you taking control, or feeling like you're in control and being able to move forward, which I think is really important. Because otherwise, you do feel like you're kicking and screaming everywhere and you just don't know which way you're going, which way's up, which way's down, and it can be quite difficult. Mm.
Yes.
Now, leadership. How did you actually get into leadership yourself?
So there's a couple of different ways. I would say from birth, I've always just been in that space where you find yourself either in charge or not necessarily in charge, but responsible for key items, key things. So, I mean, there's always that space on the playground. You're the bossy kid. That's totally fine. That's the first walking into leadership. And then I would say, growing up in a family business, leadership was not bestowed upon me, but there was this quiet expectation of you will lead by example. You may not have the authority, but you will be the person that you need to be to accomplish things. So I would say as I've continued to grow in my career, it's been something that I've pursued more actively, but initially it's always been the show up, volunteer, lead by example,
Yeah, and
serve before.
serve before. Nice. I like that too. Yeah. And
Yeah.
serve before meaning what, though? In other words, it's leading by example, but also being there to serve and look after people. Is that what you're saying?
That, and then also the fact of, like, the leaders eat last. So always knowing that your team comes before you, the mission comes before you. How can you make sure that everyone is moving in the same direction and has the resources that they need? How do you care for everyone around you so that you can achieve everything together?
Yeah. Great. Excellent. That leaders eat last, or even just serving first to make sure everyone's okay. I think that's very important. Even when I'm speaking or facilitating events, they may put on lunches and things like that. I will not touch the lunch. I will not even go near it or line up until I know that everyone else in the room, the participants, the guests, the client, everyone else has eaten before I go. And the reason I do
Absolutely.
that is because it's about them and it's about them looking after them. It's not about me. And I think a lot of leaders think about themselves a lot. Now, there's a balance here, and I want to get your point of view here because I think we do need to look after others and serve, but we also need to serve ourselves at times. What are your thoughts there?
Oh, absolutely. When we talk about balance, we talk about being mindful and caring for ourselves so that we can care for others. I think that there is a component of leadership where there is you need to be selfish to be able to be selfless. So making sure that you maintain, whether it's meditation, exercise, a good diet, a really good sleep routine, making sure that you take care of yourself and also invest in yourself in tools and resources to continue to grow as a leader. Because I think that as leadership continues to evolve over the next decade, being able to be agile and being able to learn new things and respond quickly is really important.
Yeah, excellent. Now, this person could be alive or from history. Who's your favorite leader and why?
I have so many,
Mhm.
and you told me I had to pick one, so I am. And I would say right now, in this moment, it's Tory Burch. And what I love about Tory, she's a business owner. She's grown a multi-million dollar, in fact, I think at now this point, it's $1 billion brand in the United States. But not only does she empower her organization, she also empowers other business leaders. She grows other organizations. She grows other leaders through her philanthropy. Her foundation has, I want to say, raised 5,500 business leaders within the United States and globally. And I want to say her organization has given out like $95 million in additional loans and capital contributions to grow small businesses across the world. So not only is she growing her own business, growing her own leadership footprint, she's empowering others to do the same.
That's excellent. So once again, that's leading as a role model up front and then also serving others as well at the same time. Just exactly what you said earlier on, right?
Yes, it's a theme. Leading by example is definitely a theme for me.
Yeah, good. Excellent. And have you met her personally?
I have not,
Okay.
but I model some of the things that we do at AUI and Clarity over some of the things that she has done. So one thing that we have with AUI, we turned 50 this year,
Oh,
and we're doing 50 acts of service to celebrate 50 years. So serving the community is just as important as doing business in the community, and community is one of our core values. So we have been working as a team to figure out what are some different things that we can do. What is there a 5K walk? Can we contribute or collect different items for different organizations? What can we do to continue to say thank you to the community abroad within Ohio and throughout the rest of the country to say thank you for being an amazing organization?
yeah, excellent. And congratulations, 50 years. That's awesome. A lot of
Thank you.
organizations don't even make it past just the first year nowadays. So that's really great to see. The other thing, too, is the community side. I've got another question coming up very soon for you in relation to
Yeah.
Tori. But before we go there, the community, the importance of actually having a community, being part of the community, contributing to that community as an organization. How important is that for a leader to take in mind and actually do something with it?
Oh, I think it's one of the primary things that you can do in leadership, not just to propel your organization forward, but to also give you more purpose. So when
Mm,
I talk in Reluctantly Resilient, I specifically talk about a what else. And so for me, having a what else as a business leader is something that drives me beyond profit, beyond mission. Because if we didn't have a what else, I think we'd all just have jobs. There's a difference between putting on the cloak of being a business owner, a business leader, running your own ship and leading other people where you need something to drive you beyond just profit.
yeah, excellent. Gives that sort of purpose, that
Mhm.
willingness to give back, and yeah, very good. I love that. Go back to Tori and actually the question I asked you about whether meeting her or not. Let's say you two have a catch up on a park bench somewhere, and you're having a coffee together. Would there be one question you would love to ask her?
Yes. My question for Tori would be, how do you navigate your unknowns?
Excellent.
Because for me, I grew up in the insurance industry. So fear of catastrophe is something that I think that is naturally ingrained in individuals who have to work within that industry itself, whether you're dealing with health insurance and bodily harm and getting sick, or you're dealing with catastrophes with commercial insurance. And so navigating and not being able to handle things when I don't know what the outcome can be a challenge for me. So, especially as business leaders, when we're taking risks,
Mm.
understanding or what are the tools that you use to navigate those unknowns, I would love to know that from her.
Yeah, I love it. How do you navigate your unknowns? Excellent. Great question. So, just talking about that, actually, the
Yeah.
title of the show here is called Leadership is Changing. When I mentioned that title, that sort of subject, what does it mean for you?
Oh, I think it means that the face and the makeup of what leadership is and how it's defined is constantly moving. And I think that as we continue to grow as a world, get more connected globally, the definition of what leadership looks like, I think, is constantly evolving. So I love the title of the podcast for that reason.
Mm. Yeah, it is evolving all the time. Absolutely. And I don't know about you, but I think that sort of life in the world is just seems to be getting faster and faster all the time. And I think
Yes.
technology is driving that and a whole of other things. So whether it be data, whether it be business, whether it be a social perspective or technology, a leader today in that fast paced changing world, what should they do to be successful?
Oh, I think there's a few things. Number one is being willing to be coachable.
Mm,
So oftentimes when we talk about clarity clients, we say we want two things. We want them to be coachable and open to change. And I think especially as leaders, you need to be willing to be coachable, not just from your peers, but also from the individuals you're leading, the overall global community, making sure that you can take in information and go, how is this going to work for me? How can I utilize this and make myself a more effective and efficient leader? So I think that there's being coachable. And the other I would say is being a constant learner, knowing that you have to continue to develop your skill sets because the world is constantly evolving, constantly changing. We don't need to be afraid of technology. We have a lot of things coming in AI. What I will say, my opinion of AI in leadership is that you cannot AI your people. So you have to be able to have those skills to be able to manage and lead effectively. And that is going to continue. It's an evergreen thing. It's never going away. AI cannot replace the true human connection. So building that human connection in your leadership, I think, is extremely important.
yeah, and interesting how you just said that too, because I agree with you. You can't AI your people. It's ridiculous. But I think, as you said, it's not something for you to be afraid of. It's an action enabler. It's something to empower you and also your business and your people, which is an important thing. Don't shy away from it because I think if you do, you're going to become irrelevant. You're going to be left behind, right? So you need to sort of know it. And then, but even if you're not as, I think as a leader, I actually would ask you this question from an AI perspective, even thinking about being that constant learner and so forth and being coachable, do we need to be really savvy about the AI side or is it just an awareness or should we bring a team on board? What are your thoughts there?
I think it depends on your organization and what your wheelhouse is. I know for us at AUI on the benefit side, so much of what we do is process. Process can be easily augmented with AI to become more efficient. Now, what we're doing more on the clarity side, not necessarily in the day to day things of running payroll or like onboarding people, we're building human connection. And so when you're doing the things that are really customizable, that are relatable to an individual, I think that is where you're not necessarily going to leverage as much AI. But when you're talking about building efficiencies within your organization, I think that you should absolutely think of ways that you can embrace it. And I feel oftentimes we've overlooked how much AI is already in our lives and has been in our lives for probably the last 20 to 30 years. What are your thoughts?
I think you're right. I think it has been in our lives. It just hasn't been brought out there as a word or as a topic. And I think it is going to go to another level. Even if I think about just the translation of or transcribing some of my recordings into Word, and that's been done by something called Otter.ai, and it's been around for the last 5 years at least, if not longer. And it's been there. We've been using it. Other areas are already out there. A friend of mine, he designed an AI tool 20 years ago because he could see where it was going. And
Wow.
for his time, he was early. He was very early, an early adopter, right? And I think if you're not that early adopter to even just learn about it and be aware of it, then I think you're running yourself into trouble. So I would really encourage listeners to think about AI, but also think about what it means for you. And going back to your question before, so I think was it what's next or what else is the question you said before? So what else do I need to learn about this thing? What else do I need to do? I don't, and then there's this other piece of me too saying, yes, it's very important. But then there's the piece where data, I think, is the really important piece and understanding of the data of our business or data, depending which school you went to, and potato or tomato. Yep. It just depends, I think, on that. And I think it's really important that you do have an awareness, but it's not, I hope it's not going to be like the marketing words of today, right? So it's the fun thing or it's the cool thing. Like cloud computing was around a few years ago. Everyone's, oh, I got to be in the cloud. And then others are like, what is this cloud thing? So it's very similar, but I think the AI thing is going to be part of our lives going forward a lot more than, say, cloud is.
Yes,
Hmm.
I agree. And I think the sooner that you are willing to accept the existence and the willingness to learn around it and what does it look like, I think the more efficient and effective you can be in your leadership and potentially in your organization.
Yeah, excellent. Great way of saying it. LinkedIn is another thing that I was going to ask you as well, because I think that a lot of people in business today in leadership roles, they are and they aren't really in social media. And I'm not saying that we have to be on LinkedIn 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day and liking everything. What's your thoughts about LinkedIn and how leaders should be using that to help develop their brand?
Okay, so I have a few things about LinkedIn. I used to be the person that didn't pay a lot of attention to LinkedIn because my thought was, as long as everybody knows me locally, they don't need to see me on LinkedIn. And then I realized as my business was growing, and especially in 2020, as things continued to change, that it was really important to have more of a footprint. And so I look at LinkedIn as
Right.
the potential that you have to impact leaders within your local community, but then also on a global scale. And it's about intentionality. I agree with you. You don't need to be on LinkedIn for 20 hours a day. It doesn't need to consume you, but you can take intentional acts of, I'm going to post twice a week. I'm going to make sure that I spend 15 to 20 minutes a day or every other day to work on engaging and building community. Because for me, social media presence, a LinkedIn presence is also the ability for you to find those people who may want to work for you someday that you didn't know were out there.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good way of putting it, actually, because I like what you say about the footprint and it's about local versus global. But as you say, there are a lot of people out there who probably don't know about you and would like to. It's a great way to attract the talent, probably even retain the talent because they say, oh, look what we're doing as an organization or my leader, things like that. But yeah, I think it's also about your brand too. It's about the brand of the organization, your own personal brand, and what you're doing out there to help yourself and the organization grow. As you said, it's an awareness thing, but the intentional acts is where it's key. Because if we're not intentional
Yes.
about it and doing something about it, then it's going to be throw the mud on the wall and see what sticks. In other words, I'll do something over here, then I might do something later. Oh, I haven't done anything on LinkedIn lately. Must do it. But if you're intentional and you're consistent with it, that's the key.
I agree. It's really about consistency. And the other part is looking at it as a way to leverage your network as well. Because there are individuals that I have met through LinkedIn that I would have never had the opportunity to meet at some type of local networking event in Ohio. But there are individuals that have helped me either grow my business or help some of the clients that I have grow their business because we're leveraging the breadth of connection. Someone talks about your net worth being the sum of your network. I think that's really important to think, especially as we grow as leaders.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're a listener, obviously listening to this episode and you're not sure about networking, not sure about going to events, I'm going to highly encourage you, and I'm sure that Chrissy as well, is that you do go to these events to meet one or two people, but also use LinkedIn as well to research the people who may be going if you can find out who they are and connect with them maybe beforehand. But even just connect with people there at the event and then have coffee afterwards or tea, whatever you like to do with them if you can, and grow those relationships. Don't expect to sell something or do something with that person within 5 minutes, because if you do, I don't know about you, but it's going to turn me off. I wouldn't want to know.
Oh, absolutely. I think that, especially as someone who has worked really hard to no longer be an introvert, going to those networking events was a challenge at first. And so,
Right.
if you can pregame, get to know some people ahead of time, or I'm going to meet two people and I'm going to work on just having coffee with somebody, something that isn't, I'm not expecting anything in return. I just want to make a connection. Some of the best community connections that I have grown out of going to a networking event and deciding that maybe we should just have coffee to get to learn about the things that we do in the community. We do a project with safe drug disposal. So we have an organization that we work with that provides pouches for some of our clients that are older to be able to dispose of their medications in a biodegradable way and in a great green way. And so that came out of a random coffee at a random networking event for a chamber of commerce. And I would have never expected that, but it has been something that has changed the makeup of our organization and helped some of our clients, especially.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Brilliant. See? So you just don't know where it can go and what can actually happen as a result of that. Chrissy, you and I have been talking about things from a leader's lens. If we to change lenses now and think about from an employee's perspective,
Mhm.
and also from the HR space you're working, but also in a UI side of things too. Employees' expectations of leaders, have they changed?
I don't know that they've changed as much as now we're listening more.
Oh,
I think that employees have probably always wanted their leaders to be authentic. but the push and the revelation for authenticity, I think, has really changed in the last 5 years in particular. What about you?
Yeah, definitely. And that word authenticity keeps coming up in some of the interviews and some of that question or other questions I'm asking. It's definitely coming up. When you said about listening more, what are leaders doing, or what do you think leaders should do to be able to listen more?
I think that part of it is stop talking. That's really simple. Ask questions.
Yep.
But the other is be vulnerable. So if you don't know the answer, don't act like you do. I think that especially in 2020, 2021, when we had a lot of uncertainty globally, being able to be a leader that said, I don't know what's going to happen, but these are the things that I know I'm going to take care of. And these are the things that I'm going to answer questions about as quickly and efficiently as I can. And I care about all of you in the organization, but this is what we need to work on. I think that was empowering for me as a leader. I grew significantly, especially coming from a family that grew up where our mantra was show no weakness. And I feel all of 2020 was me showing weakness every day. I don't know what's going on, but I'm going to figure it out. So I think that especially coming out of that, I think that especially as we continue to grow new employees as individuals exit childhood, come into adulthood, and enter the workforce, there's a different expectation around being vulnerable, being authentic, and being willing to say when you don't know the answer to the question.
Yeah, nothing worse than seeing a leader sitting there trying to make the answer up on the spot. It really shows that it was really not good. Yeah. And that whole time throughout the pandemic and lockdowns and the unknown there, it was huge. And it was a lot of us were stretched in the way of, from a business perspective, are we going to have jobs going forward? Are we going to have our business going to survive? A lot of businesses didn't survive throughout that period of time. Then there was a whole lot of new businesses that were launched. People going on,
Yes.
like you, going on vacations, launching a business, but being in lockdown and launching things. This podcast was launched as a result of the pandemic. Maybe I would have done a podcast, but I didn't know. Maybe I wouldn't have done it as quick, or wouldn't have actually just gone on with it right there and then. So I think there's pluses and minuses and all of that in what we think about and what we experience as we go through that unknown space, the ambiguity.
Yes. And I think that the pandemic gave us an opportunity to globally all walk through unknowns together. And now we have a universal language that what it means to walk through something when we don't necessarily know the answer or we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. But we have those opportunities now. They just look different. Whether there's a change in the economy, whether someone gets diagnosed with an illness, whether there's a major shift in an industry. Now, because we have that reference point of 2020, I think that there's more perspective around and understanding around navigating the unknown.
Yeah, excellent. Earlier on, you said about the future of leadership. So my next question to you is, if I got you to get your crystal ball out here and you think about things, actually, listeners, you can't see it, but I can see on your shelving just behind you, there's a little round ball there.
Ooh.
Yeah. So if you've got your little crystal ball out here and think about the future, where do you see leadership being in 5 years from now?
I think a few things. One, I think that leadership is going to continue to flatten. I think that how we define leadership traditionally in hierarchy, I think that is continuing to change and erode, especially as we grow with an influencer community. So, really understanding that leadership can look different. The other thing that I see is continuing that trend around vulnerability and seeing a broader impact in leadership and making sure that we take care of ourselves as leaders so that we can take care of the individuals with which we're leading. And the third that I would say is community impact. I think that leadership is moving not just from the boardroom, but also moving into the community and looking at not just what we do in our daily lives, but also what we can do to serve the community. So I see things getting broader in defining leadership that just crosses across the world.
Yeah, and that word you said before, which was influence, I think there's a huge thing there because it's more about how do we influence at all levels within the organization, whether it be inside the organization or in the community and out, or in the industry. I think the big thing is that a lot of people don't know how to influence, or their voice is not being heard at the table. And so, any thoughts from your experience around how leaders might want to think about being able to influence people more?
Yeah, I think that it's pretty simple. I think that leaders need to listen first.
Yep.
Ask a question and just listen. Do not respond. Just take it all in. I think that especially as we talk about AI, we talk about how quick and responsive and agile we've had to be because of technology. I think that we underestimate still the power of a pause in leadership, being able to think through a situation, but really just enabling ourselves to listen and allow the individual who's communicating to be heard.
Yeah. I love it. The power of the pause in leadership. That is so strong. And I think that even when we're up front presenting, speaking at any time, even one-on-one with somebody, that power of that pause, it's massive in the way that it actually will emphasize the point or will give people time to think. In fact, it gives you time to breathe and actually be,
Yes.
and be a little bit calm and control. So I think it's a really good thing. The power of the pause. I like what you just said there. Yeah.
Yes. Listening and empathy, adding in that the true connection of, I heard you. I'm sorry that you're dealing with that, or that must be a challenge, or that's really exciting. I'm so glad that you've been able to achieve that. I think that especially with social media, with likes and hits and all of those things, we tend to be really fast. And so to give true feedback and empathy is really important as well.
Yeah, and I don't know whether you've seen it, but also listeners, if you haven't seen this, there's a little video on YouTube by Brene Brown, which talks about the difference between empathy versus sympathy. And it is
Yes.
awesome to watch. And just to watch the person who's trying to do the sympathy piece, it made me laugh my head off, but it also made me aware of, oh, do I do that? What do I need to adjust? And then also think about others as well when I'm coaching them or talking to audiences. What do they need to do as well around this space? I think it's a great little video for people to watch. Have you seen that?
I have. I absolutely love it. And the purpose of sitting versus solving. I know that especially early on in my leadership, I was a solver as opposed to a sitter. Sitter meaning I'm going to stay in this with you and I'm not going to tell you how to solve it. I'm not going to tell you what to do. I'm just going to be here so you can have someone with you.
Yeah, it's excellent. Very good. Chrissy, it's been a real pleasure talking to you today. If our listeners are wanting to get hold of you, where should they go?
I am on LinkedIn. Chrissy Myers CEO is my handle. And another great place to find me is at reluctantlyresilientthebook.com.
Excellent. Once again, thank you so much for joining me. It's been a great conversation and keep up your awesomeness and what you're doing. And that's very good. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Likewise.
Excellent. There you go, listeners. Check out the book, Reluctantly Resilient, but also leading by example is very important for us to serve others and help others as well. The other thing too is the face and makeup of leadership is moving all the time. So what are we needing to do to stay up with the times and actually making sure we do that? One is the willingness to be coachable. It's very important here as well. Develop your footprint around LinkedIn so then it becomes a global footprint rather than just locally. But being authentic, being vulnerable is very important. Being influential is another one too. The power of the pause in leadership is what we should be thinking about. Hey, thanks for joining us. Until next time, bye for now.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Leadership is Changing with your host, Dennis Giannoutsas. Each week, we and our guests provide information and insights through exploring leading change, inspiring executives and leaders to adapt and lead a bigger game in a fast-moving world.